For more than 50 years, one name has been the absolute definition of the perfect crime: D.B. Cooper. It is this wild tale of guts and a leap into thin air that remains the only unsolved skyjacking in history. But here's the very first twist in a story full of them. The guy never actually called himself D.B. Cooper. So let's get into what really happened. Okay, so picture this. It's a stormy Thanksgiving Eve, 1971. Over at Portland International Airport, this man in a dark business suit walks up, pays $20 cash for a one-way flight to Seattle. A totally normal, unremarkable start to what would become this huge international mystery. The name he gave? Dan Cooper. So not long after takeoff, Cooper hands a note to a flight attendant. She figures, okay, lonely businessman, probably his phone number, and just slips it into her pocket without even looking. He then leans in and whispers, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." And just like that, with those few words, the hijacking of Northwest Orient Flight 305 was on. Now, this is what really sets this whole case apart: the hijacker's unbelievable composure. I mean, while the crew is scrambling, trying to process this terrifying situation, Cooper just calmly orders a bourbon and soda. He even pays his tab and tries to tip the flight attendant. He was described as polite, well-spoken, basically a gentleman committing a major federal crime. Cooper's demands weren't random at all. They were incredibly specific and showed he had really thought this through. And that request for 4 parachutes, that was a brilliant move. By making it seem like he might take a hostage with him, he made it pretty much impossible for the authorities to even think about giving him a parachute that wouldn't work. To keep the 36 passengers safe, the airline's president didn't even hesitate. He immediately authorized the $200,000 ransom, which, by the way, is over $1.6 million in today's money, and told every employee to cooperate fully. So as the plane is circling over Puget Sound, the FBI on the ground is just scrambling to get 10,000 $20 bills and find the parachutes he asked for. So the plane lands in Seattle, and Cooper gets exactly what he asked for. The money and parachutes are brought right on board. In exchange, he lets all the passengers go, along with 2 of the flight attendants. But he was nowhere near done. And this, right here, is where the story takes its most incredible turn. And this is where you realize this guy knew exactly what he was doing. He laid out a new set of flight instructions that were super technical. These weren't just random requests from some amateur. Nope, they showed he knew the Boeing 727 like inside and out. Especially its one really unique feature: that staircase in the back of the plane that could actually be opened in the middle of a flight. So, with the flight crew now locked safely in a cockpit, Cooper was all alone in the back of the plane. Sometime after 8 p.m., somewhere over the stormy forests of southwest Washington, a warning light flashes in the cockpit. The aft stairs were down. Then, a sudden jolt, a change in air pressure. By the time the plane landed in Reno, the money, 2 of the parachutes, and the man known as Dan Cooper had simply vanished. You have to imagine this scene in Reno. It must have been so surreal. A completely empty passenger cabin, and this open staircase just dangling from the tail of the plane. This was the start of NORJAC, which was the FBI's code name for one of the longest, most exhaustive investigations they have ever conducted. Searching the aircraft has led to more frustration. All they found were a few clues. He left behind his clip-on tie and a few cigarette butts. But of the 66 fingerprints they lifted from the plane, none of them could be matched to any suspect in the system. It was really like a ghost had been on board. The search that followed was absolutely massive, one of the biggest in U.S. history. We're talking hundreds of agents and soldiers combing through this incredibly rugged terrain. They looked on foot, they used helicopters, they even brought in a submarine to check a local lake. And after all that, they found nothing. No parachute, no briefcase, no money. No trace of Cooper whatsoever. He was just gone. So for almost a decade, the case just went completely cold. It became this modern-day legend, the story of the one who actually got away. Then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, a completely random discovery just reignited the entire investigation. For years, this was the big question on everyone's mind. I mean, if Cooper survived, he had to have spent the money, right? And if he died in the jump, where was it? Well, the answer finally came, but from a very, very unexpected source. So get this, in 1980, this young boy, his name was Brian Ingram, was out on a family picnic along the Columbia River. He's digging a fire pit on a sandbar, and his hands just brush up against something weird in the sand, these decaying bundles of $20 bills. And this wasn't just any old money. the FBI moved fast and quickly confirmed that the serial numbers were a direct match to the ransom cash. After 9 long years, this was it. The first, and still to this day, the only piece of physical evidence from the crime ever found outside of that airplane. But here's the thing. Instead of solving the case, the money just made it all so much more confusing. The scientific analysis was a total puzzle. Evidence suggested the money hadn't just been sitting there since 1971. In fact, it probably washed up on that specific sandbar years after the hijacking. So, how did it get there? The only solid clue in the entire case just made the mystery even deeper. Then, in 2016, the FBI officially suspended its active investigation, basically acknowledging that after all this time, the case was probably never going to be solved. And yet, the legacy of D.B. Cooper is anything but gone. It has had this lasting and profound impact on all of our lives, whether we realize it or not. It's really hard to imagine now, but before D.B. Cooper, you could basically just walk onto a plane with almost no security check at all. His crime changed everything. Suddenly, screening all baggage became mandatory, cockpit doors were reinforced, and they even installed this special device nicknamed the Cooper vane on all 727s, specifically to stop anyone from ever pulling off his escape again. Just think about that for a second. In the entire history of commercial air travel, with all the resources of law enforcement agencies all over the world, this is the one skyjacking that has never, ever been solved. A single unidentified man pulled off a crime that has baffled investigators for more than half a century. And so here we are, left with the ultimate question. Did he actually pull off the perfect crime, disappearing with a fortune to start a new life? Or did he plummet to his death in that stormy wilderness, his body and the rest of the money still out there, waiting to be found? The perfect crime or a fatal mistake? The mystery lives on.